So a pastor was crossing the road one day when a frog calls out to him and said, "If you kiss me, I'll turn into a beautiful princess." And he bent over and he picked up the frog and he put it in his pocket. And the frog spoke up again and said, "If you kiss me, I'll turn into a beautiful princess and I'll stay with you for a week." And the pastor took the frog out of his pocket and he smiled and he put it back in his pocket. And then the frog called out again and said, "If you kiss me, I'll turn into a princess and I'll stay with you for a week and I'll do anything you want. I'll give you anything you want." And the pastor took the frog out and smiled and put it back in his pocket. And finally the frog asked, she says, "What's the matter? I told you I'm a beautiful princess. I'll stay with you for a week. I'll give you anything you want. I'm a princess. I can give you anything. Why won't you kiss me?" And the pastor says, "Look, I'm a pastor. I've already got a wife. But a talking frog? That's cool." Okay, so today's Valentine's Day, and that means that we have to make the obligatory visit to 1 Corinthians 13 to talk about how love is patient and love is kind, yada, 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 blah, blah, blah. Or not. I don't know about you, but I am sick and tired of hearing 1 Corinthians 13 read at weddings and Valentine's Day, and you always got to read it. I'm tired of it. So, while I was putting this together, the kids happened to be around me while I was working on it, so I was kind of getting a little input from them about what we should talk about here. And if you ask Sherman what we should talk about today, he would tell you, "Tractor stuck in the mud." Yeah, that's cool. Tractor stuck in the mud. Not that one, but Sophia doesn't like that one. So you like that one, Sherman? Good. So she says, pink tractors. That's what we should have. We should have pink tractors, which I admit goes much better with the Valentine's Day theme, right? Pink tractors are pretty good. But because I'm the one who gets to write the sermon and I get to do the presentations, we get to talk about what I want to talk about. So we're going to talk about something really cool today. We're going to talk about Roman soldiers. Yeah. Someday you'll think that's cool, Sherman. Or not. Come on, Roman soldiers. That's the part I want you guys to see. So if you want to go play now, you can, because it just gets boring from here on out. You don't have to. You can stay if you want, but if it gets too boring, you can leave. All right? I just wanted you to see your tractors. All right, so we're going to talk about Roman soldiers. Now, Roman soldiers don't necessarily give off that lovey-dovey Valentine sort of vibe. They are wearing red. I was thinking about editing the photo to put like hearts on them, but I didn't do that. It would have been cute. But at least one Roman soldier kind of got this concept about love. And so we're going to talk about the lessons we can learn from that soldier today. And we're going to be in Luke 7. And I'm going to read through this passage first, and then we'll break it down a little bit to figure out the lessons we can get out of this. So Luke 7, starting at line 1. After he had finished all his sayings in the hearing of the people, he entered Capernaum. Now a centurion had a servant who was sick and at the point of death, who was highly valued by him. When the centurion heard about Jesus, he sent to him elders of the Jews, asking him to come and heal his servant. And when they came to Jesus, they pleaded with him earnestly, saying, "He is worthy to have you do this for him, for he loves our nation, and he is one who built us our synagogue." And Jesus went with them. When he was not far from the house, the centurion sent friends, saying to him, "Lord, do not trouble yourself, for I am not worthy to have you come under my roof. Therefore I did not presume to come to you, but say the word and let my servant be healed. For I too am a man set under authority with soldiers under me. And I say to one, 'Go,' and he goes, and to another, 'Come,' and he comes. And to my servant, 'Do this,' and he does it." When Jesus heard these things, he marveled at him, and turning to the crowd that followed him, said, I tell you, not even in Israel have I found such faith. And when those who had been sent returned to the house, they found the servant well. Okay, so we have lots of good stuff to talk about in this passage. And our first topic will be loving the lowly. And in line 2 it said, Now a centurion had a servant who was sick and at the point of death, who was highly valued by him. So we start this off, we got a centurion, we got a servant. And by servant we really mean bondservant or slave. It's a slave. Now a centurion is a military leader. He's basically the equivalent of a captain in our modern military. He's well paid, he has a prestigious social position, and he probably would have been in battles and lost men. Now, he might not have been in any large-scale battles because it's currently a time of peace. But anyway, we add all those things together, the loss of a slave doesn't seem like it should be that big of a deal for him. But it was. This was a big deal for him. And this is our first step in understanding that this centurion is a little different. And he's different in a way that's really going to resonate with Jesus and should really resonate with us today. As we read in Matthew 20, line 25, it says, But Jesus called them to him and said, You know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their great ones exercise authority over them. It shall not be so among you. But whoever would be great among you must be your servant, and whoever would be first among you must be your slave. Even as the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and give his life as a ransom for many. Now, it's a commonly held idea that to be a leader, you must either be loved or hated. Loved or feared, sorry. Loved or feared. Feared and hated. Loved or feared. Most leaders choose to be feared. They keep followers in line by exercising power over them, while holding the outlook that those people only have value inasmuch as they're doing something for that leader. That's the value they have. We see this kind of leadership anytime we see some politician or corporate executive or someone like that seek to get their way by throwing their influence around, bribing people, blocking others from going against their will. So that's kind of where we'll see that in our modern day. Back then, centurions, they had a stick. They got this official stick called a vitis. It was a symbol of their rank and authority, a vitis. So each centurion is responsible for training his own soldiers. And a vitis was used to whack them when they weren't performing well. Whack them with the vitis. So the idea of exercising authority, the stick, getting hit with a stick, that's me exercising authority on you. This is an idea that's certainly part of the Roman mindset. Yet here he has expressed great love for a slave, someone that he can certainly replace easily. But the centurion understood that the slave had value, not as a piece of property, not just for what he does for him, but he's another person. He deserves consideration that humans need. 1 John 3, line 17 says, But if anyone has the world's goods and sees his brother in need, yet closes his heart against him, how does God's love abide in him? Little children, let us not love in word or talk, but in deed and in truth. The centurion had wealth, he had power, and he exercised it in love. To care for one who's beneath him. And this is just as Jesus would have us do today. And this probably isn't a shocker for anybody to hear that. We know that he expects this of us. But as we go through the rest of the story, we'll see that it wasn't necessarily an easy choice for him to do this, and it's not necessarily an easy choice for us to do it today for various reasons. So moving on to our next lesson we're going to get from this, we're going to talk about loving your rivals. Line 4 says, And when they came to Jesus, they pleaded with him, earnestly saying, He is worthy to have you do this for him, for he loves our nation, and he is the one who built us our synagogue. If I asked you to give a one-word answer to the question, what did the Jews hate the most in the first century? It's an easy answer. It's Rome. They hated Rome. Okay, they absolutely hated their Roman oppressors. And their deep desire for the Messiah was specifically so he would come and overthrow their Roman oppressors and bring back the kingdom of David for them. And there were various revolts from the Jews. They revolted numerous times, and each time they were put down by force by the Romans. So this idea that there are Jews, these Jewish elders, they come to Jesus and they are supporting the cause of a Roman military commander is astounding. It's mind-blowing. How could this be? Well, once again, we are seeing how this centurion is different. And oddly enough, to get a better understanding of why he might be different, to clarify this, I'm going to take us into a parable that's usually seen as quite murky. It's quite hard to understand. But it's going to help us get a little clarity here. And this is Luke 16, 1 through 9. And it says, "He also said to the disciples, 'There was a rich man who had a manager, and charges were brought to him that this man was wasting his possessions. And he called him and said to him, "What is it that I hear about you? Turn in the account of your management, for you can no longer be manager." And the manager said to himself, "What shall I do, since my master is taking the management away from me? I am not strong enough to dig. I am ashamed to beg. I have decided what to do, so that when I am removed from management, people may receive me into their houses." So summoning his master's debtors, one by one, he said to the first, "How much do you owe my master?" And he said, 100 measures of oil. He said to him, "Take your bill, sit down quickly, and write 50. And he said to another, "How much do you owe?" And he said, 100 measures of wheat. And he said to him, "Take your bill and write 80. And the master commended the dishonest manager for his shrewdness. For the sons of this world are more shrewd in dealing with their own generation than the sons of light. And I tell you, make friends for yourselves by means of unrighteous wealth, so that when it fails, they may receive you into eternal dwellings." Now I'll tell you what this means in the case of the Roman centurion. You don't get the position of centurion by being a nice guy to the foreigners. Right? You earn it by showing valor in battle, or you could be appointed by exhibiting great loyalty to Rome and impressing somebody with a lot of influence. Either way, you did it by being a good Roman, giving honor to the emperor, worshiping the Roman gods, and placing the good of Rome above everything else. At some point, the centurion gets stationed in Capernaum. And who knows what he thought of the Jews initially? No idea. But you can be certain the Jews didn't like him. They didn't want anything to do with him. But somehow, who knows how long he was stationed there before this story, but somehow during that time, the understanding of God came to this man. He realized that there was truth in the God of the Jews. And though he's basically there as an adversary to the Jewish people, he instead saw them as the valued people of God. And once we've got this idea of people having intrinsic value that's part of them because they're a creation of God. Now, having made this realization and coming to a better understanding of who God is, he finds himself in the position of the shrewd manager. God is going to look at his life and see that he had devotion to Rome and devotion to false gods and devotion to duty, but no devotion to the true God. The resources that God has blessed him with have been squandered and wasted on the world. And God would hold him accountable for his actions. And so, like the shrewd manager who went to those he had done business with, most likely he had been ripping those people off anyway, to cook the books and all that. So he went to those people to make amends. And so the centurion does the same. He sought to make amends with those he had dealings with. He went to God's people and treated them with kindness. He gave them money to build a synagogue. He sought to protect the Jewish nation instead of just the nation of Rome. He didn't simply do this out of fear of self-preservation either. He did it out of a new understanding of love. A love that gave him such anguish at his servant being ill, a love that allowed him to care deeply for the people of another nation, even while in a position that was expected to be oppressive to the people of that nation. And we can see him living out an ideal of love that is expressed in Romans 12, line 15. Rejoice with those who rejoice. Weep with those who weep. Live in harmony with one another. Do not be haughty, but associate with the lowly. Never be wise in your own sight. Repay no one evil for evil, but give thought to do what is honorable in the sight of all. If possible, so far as it depends on you, live peaceably with all. And so from the centurion, we learn not only to love those who may be seen as below us, but to love those even who may be in opposition to us. But loving those who may seem to be in opposition to us can be hard. Not only convincing ourselves to do it, but the influence that other people have around us, that they don't think that's right, that they think that's strange, and that we shouldn't do it. And so we come to our next lesson. Loving despite opposition. Line 6 in our scripture today, it says, "And Jesus went with them." And it's only 5 little words, but it meant a lot. You may remember last week we spoke about the disassociated and how Jesus came to find those people. He came to find the lost. And in doing so, he spent time with the sinners and the tax collectors, and the Pharisees were aghast at his actions in doing that. Well, when Jesus agreed to go with them, when he agreed to help the centurion's servant, he's doing something 100 times worse than eating with tax collectors and sinners. It's bad enough that he hangs out with the sinners, but going into a Gentile's house is a big no-no. And then you add the fact that it's a Roman military commander on top of that. And I could imagine if a Pharisee watched him actually accept this, that he would literally have a heart attack and just die right there from this. It would be so mind-blowing for him to do this. Unprecedented. But understand that Jesus is not the only one with a reputation to think about here. The centurion has his own predicament. He has a position of respect and authority with the Roman people. People look up to him, and yet when one of his own people is sick, what does he do? Does he get a Roman physician? Does he go to the Roman gods? No. He goes to those weird Jews. He goes to those weird Jewish people and asks them for help. It's bad enough that he's funding their synagogue and he acts so nicely to them, but now he goes to them for help instead of his own kind. That's not going to get you any promotions or anything like that. That's not going to get you a raise doing that. But coming back to Jesus, he made it well known that he was a follower of Torah. He's a follower of God's law. But he was more than willing to discard any Pharisaic traditions if it would prevent him from showing mercy to someone. Like we read in 1 Timothy 1, line 5, "The aim of our charge is love that issues from a pure heart and good conscience and sincere faith." The aim of Christ's charge was love. And he would not be deterred from that to save reputation with the religious elite. And we see his followers recognize this in Mark 12, line 14. "And they came to him and said, 'Teacher, we know that you are true and do not care about anyone's opinion. For you are not swayed by appearances, but truly teach the way of God.'" And we've seen other instances where he has been confronted with being ceremoniously unclean, which is what would happen to him if he walked into the house of a Gentile. As soon as you walked into a Gentile's house, you're ceremonially unclean. And you're going to have to go through a whole bunch of stuff to get cleaned again, and people shouldn't be around you, and you can't go to the temple and worship. It's a real pain. But he's already been through these opportunities before. We've seen this happen before. In one instance, it's in Mark 5. It says, "A great crowd followed him and thronged about him, and there was a woman who had a discharge of blood for 12 years. And who had suffered much under many physicians, and had spent all she had, and was no better, but rather grew worse. She had heard the reports about Jesus, and came up behind him in the crowd, and touched his garment. For she said, 'If I touch even his garments, I'll be made well.' And immediately the flow of blood dried up, and she felt in her body that she was healed of her disease. And Jesus, perceiving in himself that power had gone out from him, immediately turned about in the crowd and said, "Who touched my garments?" And his disciples said to him, "You see the crowd pressing around you, and yet you say, 'Who touched me?'" And he looked around to see who had done it. But the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came in fear and trembling, and fell down before him, and told him the whole truth. And he said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace, and be healed of your disease." Now, any Pharisee would have been greatly distressed to have been touched by this woman. And most Jews in her case would have never even tried it, because they knew that it was wrong to do that, to make a religious leader impure by touching him like that. But she had to give it a try with Jesus. She heard about Jesus. She had to give it a try. And she figured if she was just sneaky about it, she could just touch him. He'd never know. It'd be all right. But she got caught. And she knew the wrath that could await her for that. Right? She was doing something that was really looked down on. And so we see it says the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came in fear and trembling because of what she had done. Because she'd done something wrong, basically. She wasn't supposed to do that. And she fell down before him, told him the whole truth. But he was not angry with her in the least. His response was one of love. He loved her, even when everyone else said he shouldn't. He loved the centurion and the centurion's slave, even when the religious leaders would hold that against him as sinful and impure. And the same goes for us. Do not be ashamed to love people. And they may need more than love, and you may or may not be able to offer that or give that to them, but they deserve love, no matter what others may say. And so then we come to the last lesson of our scripture, which is about loving God. When he was not far from the house, the centurion sent friends, saying to him, "Lord, do not trouble yourself, for I am not worthy to have you come under my roof. Therefore I did not presume to come to you, but say the word and let my servant be healed. For I too am a man set under authority, with soldiers under me. And I say to one, 'Go,' and he goes, and to another, 'Come,' and he comes. And to my servant, 'Do this,' and he does it." When Jesus heard these things, he marveled at him, and turning to the crowd that followed him, said, "I tell you, not even in Israel have I found such faith." And when those who had been sent returned to the house, they found the servant well. The previous lessons were all about the way that we love each other. And this one is about the love we show to God and understanding that love comes from God. When the centurion heard that Jesus was actually going to come to his house, he was quick to grab some friends and say, "Hey, go stop him." He was a friend of the Jews. He understood the Jews. He understood it would be improper for Jesus to come into his house. And so he showed love and respect for Jesus and the holiness of God by stopping him. But that begs the question, why do you ask him to come and then tell him to stop when he starts to come? That seems a little weird. Like, come to my house. No, don't come to my house. He understood that Jesus didn't need to step foot in the house. He understood that Jesus had power that was given to him by the Father. Right? So he had power that was coming through him and could be issued from him. Much the same way that he is imbued with power by the emperor. And that power flows through him, and he can use it to send his men this way and that, and they'll follow that authority. So in this way, he doesn't need to come in. He can use that power that comes from the Father, and he can send it forth to the house. He understands this as the Messiah, that he can do this. He has that power. He doesn't need to come in himself. He can send power from him. And when Jesus hears this, that a Gentile, a Roman of all people, understands these things concerning the Messiah, he cannot help but marvel and comment to the elders around him, "I tell you, even in Israel I have not found such faith." And this brings us back and joins together with the parable of the shrewd manager from earlier, where it says, "The manager commended the dishonest manager for his shrewdness. For the sons of this world are more shrewd in dealing with their own generation than the sons of light." In both cases, those who were outsiders to God's people are able to see what's important. They're able to see what's to come, and they act accordingly. And yet those of God's people, the people of Israel, the sons of light, they don't see these things. They didn't see them. And so what of us? Do we see these things? Do we understand the power of God's love? And do we use it accordingly? The centurion had learned the truth of love from God and God's people and understood that Jesus was the embodiment of God's love. But how do we make sure that the world understands this lesson still today? What are we to do to ensure that the centurions and the slaves and the Romans and the Gentiles of today experience the same love and see it manifested in their lives? And for the answer to that, I'm going to leave you with the words of John, who can explain this much better than I can. So John 4, starting at line 7. Beloved, let us love one another, for love is from God. And whoever loves has been born of God and knows God. Anyone who does not love does not know God, because God is love. In this, the love of God was made manifest among us, that God sent His only Son into the world, so that we might live through Him. In this is love, not that we have loved God, but that He loved us, and sent His Son to be the propitiation for our sins. Beloved, if God so loved us, we also ought to love one another. No one has ever seen God, but if we love one another, God abides in us, and His love is perfected in us. And so your message to take away for today is, may God's love be perfected in all of us as we reach out to the lowly and even those who oppose us, with no fear of what others may think of us, but instead having the surety that God does abide in us, and that the world may come to know Him by the love that we show. Amen.